I've used a lot of superlatives about Newcastle, past 10 years or so. Each time I think, oh, it can't be that good, I've overstated the case again. And yet each time, when I see it for the first time, coming over the Tyne, the whole excitement of the place gets me just as though it was the very first time I'd ever seen it.
The man standing on the corner of Collingwood Street was not a local man. Ian Nairn was an architecture critic, originally from Bedford. He visited cities playing what he describes as the ultimate game.
Where people normally go to town centres to shop or have a meal, I go there to read them like a detective novel, to try and unravel what's gone wrong, what's gone right.
Nairn was an opinionated man. If he saw flaws in a place, he would make them known.
So you could have put Nairn in front of a breeze block wall and still got good telly.
In this particular part, there's no reason at all why the buildings have to be this dead straight. It really is dead boring, this lot. If you've got a view as splendid as this, please don't build houses like those over there to look at it, because a view is a two-way responsibility. It's great for you. You can gaze out over Huddersfield. Huddersfield has got to look at you, and the sight isn't very nice. Well, you can't win them all.
Nairn visited Newcastle in 1970. This was a point in time where the city was at a precipice, a chance to turn the tides on deindustrialisation, and a chance to rebuild. Vast parts of the city centre laid vacant, with derelict buildings and major construction projects beginning. What was captured tells a tale of the city at that point in time. I'm going to follow in the footsteps of Ian Nairn and see how the city's progressed in the last 50 years.
Cathedral was a medieval church. It wasn't built as a cathedral. The bridges, and it's a real city it's in too. The tangle of roads and railways, the skyline beyond, and the great chasm.
The one part of the city we are lucky to still have is Grangertown and the mix of medieval street layouts. This makes for one of the finest city centres in the UK. However, parts of Grangertown were not so lucky. Parts of Eldon Square were lost for a modern shopping centre. What still remains is the multi-layer city towards the quayside. The 1960s and 70s plans for the city attempted to expand upon this with a skywalk system. The skywalks to the east of the city centre are an approach which tries to echo the layers of the city. Unlike Granger's scheme of interwoven streets, the skywalks aimed to comprehensively change one part of the city. The landscapes, created in their own way, offer a brutal beauty. The curve of Manors car park and motorways adjoining this do create the feeling of a city in the sky. The skywalks, however, fell out of favour due to the half-built network and feelings of safety. In recent years, parts of the skywalk network have been pulled down and replaced with streets at the surface level. It's likely in 30 years' time the skywalk network will be a relic of the past. What's clear now is there are very few parts of the city where the new and old are well integrated, with the exception of the quayside.
And the part of Newcastle that most needs something doing to it quickly is the area that slopes steeply down to the river. The part that's got the chares running through it, these great sequences of narrow staircases running between walls.
The chares of Newcastle are one of the most unique spaces within an English city. Traversing down the Tyne Gorge, the regeneration of these has seen a number of new apartment buildings on the sides, with many of the steps and stairs replaced.
Nothing new has been built here in the last 10 years. There are plans, there are plenty of them, but nothing has actually gone up. And meanwhile, the very few old buildings are getting in a worse and worse condition. Some of them are really desperate now, and I'm afraid that if it goes on much longer, the structures will be so bad they're going to have to clear the whole lot and start again.
These new buildings have done little to breathe new life into the chares, abutting them with brick and stone walls, with no windows to provide overlooking or life onto these steps. The scale of the buildings, whilst acceptable in the overall skyline, this dominates the chares into narrow canyons that climb the banks.
If it goes on much longer, the structures will be so bad they're going to have to clear the whole lot and start again.
An area that suffered this fate was that surrounding All Saints' Church. This part of the quayside over time has been replaced with 20th and 21st century additions. Some of these are bad, others are fine, but the area has no character or life. The developments down here could be anywhere in the UK, which is fine for elsewhere, but for here, this location has the potential to be something truly incredible. The most evocative part of this film for me is a non-narrated montage of the quayside. There have been a number of successes here. Gateshead's landmark structures, the Baltic, Sage and Millennium Bridge, as well as more modest wins for Newcastle in the Terry Farrell master plan. This has created a modern river's edge of offices. It's undoubted that the regeneration of this area has been a success. It's clear this area has come a long way since Nairn visited. However, it is a paper-thin regeneration. Gateshead goes from the iconic Baltic to an adequate modern hotel, to low-lying industrial sheds. For a regeneration that is in the textbooks, if you look beyond the few marketing angles, it shows a job which, on Gateshead's side, is only half done. Newcastle, in contrast, has a strong river's edge. The Tyne and Weir Development Corporation and Terry Farrell's master plan played a great hand in this. But beyond the river's edge, a giant car park hides behind the offices, and beyond that is a mixed bag of city road. 20 years on from the quayside's regeneration, little trickle-down benefits can be seen in the streets beyond.
And all the other buildings in the centre of Newcastle, the new ones, seem to have the same feeling. The new City Library by Sir Basil Spence is trying harder in the sense of the Gateshead town centre, but without any conviction. It's a fancy dress put on, where the Gateshead building seems to me to be real.
Basil Spence designed City Library shown at the time only lasted 40 years before it was replaced by the current City Library. Concrete panels were replaced by a glass facade.
It's been left to Gateshead, lowly Gateshead on the other side of the Tyne there, to show what you could do. You may not like the shape that's happened in the new Gateshead town centre, but you can't at all call it sort of mealy-mouthed. It's there, it's an actual shape. It's standing up and saying, I'm the town centre. And that's what the block in Pilgrim Street should have done.
Nairn highlights how Gateshead and their Trinity Square development in the town centre was at least ambitious in its design. This is another lost Tyneside building, since being replaced by its namesake, a Tesco town regeneration. This has much less ambition.
I'm sitting in the Royal Arcade in Newcastle. It's another slice of Granger and Dobson. It never really worked because it was intended to connect up with more of the town, the eastern end, and that never caught on. So it was always a kind of dead end. It was always in trouble. First of all, in commercial trouble, and then in trouble because it was in the way. And now it's in real trouble, because look at it. Now, where the arcade used to be in Pilgrim Street, there's a new office block and a roundabout. It's meant to be the set piece you see as you drive across the Tyne into Newcastle. And in the middle of it, almost invisible, is a replica of the inside of the Royal Arcade. But I don't think it's going to work as part of Newcastle. Because, as I say, this building's on a roundabout, and pedestrians will have to get there through the usual man-hating kind of underpass. Who's going to bother? And this is an immaculate replica put up on the same site. but neither really contribute anything to the towns they're in. And the building above is all right, it's decent, but it's no more than that. When you get there, the long journey up and across the Tyne, you think, oh.
55 Degrees North is one of the buildings mentioned which still remains. Its replica of an arcade has since been closed away inside a restaurant. The building since has been converted from offices into residential flats.
But in spite of that, in spite of the uneven quality, and in spite of the fact that there's no real Tyneside style, I'm still hopeful. Not least because the best buildings here are often put up by the local architects. And also, the best buildings have been put up in the last few years. These are Newcastle's newest buildings.
There have been a number of better quality buildings constructed in the city centre within the last 10 years. The focus of this is around the site of Newcastle's former brewery, now known as Newcastle Helix. The urban design and buildings here are of higher quality. This is a project being spearheaded by the City Council and Newcastle University. The private sector contributed Hadrian's Tower across the road, which forms Newcastle's tallest tower, taking over from a 1960s point block flat. The regeneration of Newcastle is not a finite process. It'll be ongoing even after I'm gone. It'll be interesting to see how in 50 years the city has changed.